This is Salam Radio, Peterborough's Muslim community radio. Broadcasting on 106.2 FM and online.
Good evening and welcome to Winning Women, the show that puts trailblazing women centre stage, celebrating their wins and uncovering the stories behind their success. I'm your host, Iram Shah, and tonight's theme is United with Diversity. As we celebrate Black History Month, we're reflecting on what it truly means to stand together to build communities that are inclusive and strong. My guest this evening is Saskia Cole, founder of Black Snowflake, a platform that empowers students and teachers to explore diversity, equality and inclusion through creativity and open conversation. Saskia, welcome to Winning Women.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi. So just for our listeners, Saskia, Black Snowflake has such a distinctive name. What inspired it?
So I was getting called Snowflake a lot online when I was constantly kind of tweeting about anti-racism and people saying I was a bit too sensitive. And back then it was, you were the snowflake. And I thought, well, why don't I just take that name and kind of reflect it back and empower the name and make it something that I'm really proud of. And snowflakes are all unique and individual. And it's actually something I use even within my teachings because, you know, with children, we're trying to teach them that they're all unique individuals. But as a collective, they're still all the human race. And snowflakes are kind of similar. They're all unique and individual, but as a collective, they're all snow.
I love that. That's a perfect name for you as well. That's a perfect name for the type of work that you do. And what message do you hope it sends?
I hope it kind of says that we're all unique individuals, and it's called Black Snowflake specifically because it was to challenge who I am and my identity as well. So me being the Black Snowflake. And that's kind of, yeah.
And what personal experiences have actually led you to create Black Snowflake?
So I grew up in Peterborough all my life, and I basically, for a long time, kind of felt like I couldn't really challenge the world I lived in and kind of, you know, everyone talks about racial coding and switching, and I think for a long time I kind of was racially switching and, you know, trying to blend in with this majority white society and spaces that I was in. And so I think I wanted to do this because I just wanted to give those children that voice back and like not let them grow up how I did, because it creates a really bad mental health state. And I really want to support our youth to feel empowered and find their identity at a younger age.
So when you say living in Peterborough, you've experienced these things. What type of things would you like to elaborate?
Yeah, so through school I was racially abused, physically and also vocally. It was really challenging for me. I had to be removed from school and ended up being pulled out of Northborough and going to Casterton. But these outskirts schools are quite lack that diversity. So I was always kind of like the only person of colour in my school or one of a few. So that made it really challenging anyway to blend in. And then throughout school, I think I kind of just learned to kind of blend in. And my mum kind of had the attitude of, you know, just ignore it and get on. And I think that attitude, it's kind of the colourblind attitude, and it's been very challenging to have that conversation with my mum specifically, but it's something that you have to overcome. But after school, even within workplaces, I used to work at Topshop back in the day in Queensgate, and even in that situation, like my manager would say, oh, aren't you related to so-and-so just because we're both brown? And it was like, I'm not related to every brown person. And it's all these like subtle microaggressions that you kind of are aware of, but you just don't say anything. And I think that kind of led me to where I am. And I think the most triggering point for me was university, when you start to sort of critically think and are challenged about ideologies and, you know, identity. Like that's a massive thing, especially when you go into university and you're doing fashion, which is what I did. We talk a lot about culture and identity and expression. And during that time, I was really challenged to think about myself, and I really did start pushing back on like things that were happening around me. And then the pandemic happened, and that was kind of a pinnacle moment for me where I was like, enough is enough. And that's where I kind of have started my journey in activism and supporting my community more.
And your journey to activism, what type of things were you doing at that stage?
So in 2020, when George Floyd was murdered, I basically was the person that made that post that went semi-viral in Peterborough that was like, let's all stand together, like I'm going to be here this day, this time, and it just got really, really big, and that's what started BLM Peterborough, and I ended up being like one of the co-founders of BLM Peterborough from just doing that post alone, and it was one of the biggest protests we've ever had in Peterborough. So I think that for me was like the biggest activism thing I've ever done, and from that I've been on radio shows and, you know, started my work within schools through that.
And is that what sparked your business, Black Snowflake, now?
Yeah, so I think my business Black Snowflake came about a few different things. So through working with BLM Peterborough, that was like a community action group, and that's kind of why we started that. And then from that, we were seeing like, you know, parents reaching out to us and students reaching out to us, DMing us on like Instagram and asking us to come into their schools and all these kind of things. And I realized that there was this like market of support needed within education. And then it took me back to thinking about when I was younger, and I was like, do you know what, that is a pinnacle moment and a grassroots moment where we can really impact people from a young age. And I was like, this is what we need to do, like there needs to be a business in this. So I spoke to like the other co-founder of BLM Peterborough, and I was like, I think I should do this, and she was like, yes, do it. And actually she works for me quite often when I go into schools as well as part of Black Snowflake, so that's really awesome.
Oh, cool. And you felt as if like you needed to tackle this when they're young.
Yeah, I really think that education is such a fundamental part of life, especially when you're younger. Like when you start to acknowledge race or know that people look different, it's at such a young age. So if we're not tackling it from primary school, like reception, and then teaching them to kind of understand that diversity is beautiful, and that everything's acceptable and okay, then they're going to have this kind of hostility towards it, and it just starts to build and build and build, where they think that how they're thinking is appropriate, but it's not. So they need to be challenged at a younger age.
Yeah, and at that age, what forms of racism have you been tackling?
So within primary schools and things like that, they do get called things like poo face and like, you know, all these kind of different derogatory terms which are not acceptable, but it does tend to be because they're just not really aware. And we say it comes from curiosity, but it is rooted in being mean, like they're being bullies. The way I try and address it with children specifically is to more talk about self-identity and inclusion. So we will look at like skin colours. Like for instance, I was in primary school teaching Key Stage 1 and 2, so obviously that's super young. What I did with them was like a colour exercise where I took in primary colours and we just blended different skin tones. We talked about skin colour and we took it from there. So it was still an anti-racism workshop, but it was focusing on like an arts and crafts kind of expression rather than, you know, this is the theory behind it, which kids won't really understand or take in.
Yeah, and actually that leads me to my next point, because you do use a lot of creativity such as art, colour, language, and you've got a fashion background as well. So why was creativity such an important way to deliver your message?
So I feel like when I was at school, the fundamental things that like fixate for me are things that where I was really involved or incorporated in an activity. Whereas when you're just like watching a PowerPoint, it doesn't always go in. Like everyone learns in a different way. But I do find that when you're doing something creative, for most people, that kind of like locks in your brain.
Yeah, and some of your workshops also use storytelling and art. So do you think these creative tools often succeed a more sort of traditional classroom?
Yeah, I definitely think so, especially with like the younger kids. Like when they get a bit older, that's where we do a bit more theory. But when we talk about theory, we still do group activities. Like we use quite a lot of post-it note work, work, where like the kids might write down something, but then we'll collectively talk about it in groups. And that sort of challenges critical thinking at a younger age as well, because I feel like in the educational systems at the moment, most children don't experience the notion of critical thinking until quite often they get to university, because that's when they're asked to go and do things, go study, go do this, and challenged to do things on their own. Whereas when they're still in these educations of secondary school, for instance, they're still kind of adhering to authority, and that doesn't lack for that space to grow.
Yeah. So and why do you think that is?
I think it's just because our educational system is quite old-fashioned now still, and it hasn't really like modernized. And I think there are some teachers that do amazing jobs and are willing to have these open conversations and go in above and beyond. But unfortunately, teachers are driven by curriculum and like what they're going to be tested on, and that does impact what they'll teach and the effort they can put into kind of extracurricular. And I feel like teachers are probably underpaid enough for what they do, and that's probably how they feel. So they don't want to go above and beyond.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Saskia. It's been really. If you've just joined in, we are on Salam Radio Winning Women on 106.2 FM. If you're listening in, do message, do give us a call. Tonight's theme is United with Diversity, and I think that's such an important conversation with the current climate. What does that phrase mean to you personally?
I think about England when I think about United by Diversity, because I think we're such a diverse country. Like, we're built on that. And I think, you know, Peterborough specifically, like, this is my hometown, this is where I grew up. And I think there's not been a time where I've walked down the street and not felt like we're a diverse city. And I think that's something really beautiful in that, because we can take so many different things from different cultures and learn different things. And I think that's really nice. Like, we talk about art and culture and all these like different things. And that's motivating and inspiring. And I think that when you look at Peterborough, you know, being voted the worst city and all these things, and like people think it's very bleak here, what I find the beauty in is the diversity and the people that you meet.
Yeah, the communities are very lovely here. Yeah. No, I'm quite new to Peterborough, so it's quite new. Oh, sorry, I just got distracted a little bit. 1 minute. Sorry, I think the producer's trying to say something there. Okay, so what we're saying, and then you said how Black Snowflake is about making the comfortable uncomfortable. Why do you think so many schools are struggling to have open conversations with race and identity?
I do think that a lot of white teachers will worry that they're saying the wrong thing, and we've had that quite a few times where they're, you know, not too sure about challenging this thought or like how to address it with the student, and then also kind of what the outcome should be of the situation. So is the punishment like adequate for what happened? And I find that with students as well. So I think there's a pushback that students don't always feel like if they've been racially abused that they're getting the outcome and justice they deserve. Exactly.
So, and also some of the I think do you explain to young children the impact of the negative connotations of, you know, the language they use, the referencing to other communities? Yeah,
definitely. So it obviously depends on the age range you're working within, like what kind of attitude you go with. But for instance, when I've been at TDA, I've openly talked to them, and so is my colleague, about the experiences we've had and like addressing things with the police. So I got called some really horrible names through social media, and I took that to the police because it was really horrible.
How old were these children?
They were like 16.
Right.
They were quite young, but it did end up getting quite far, and like the kid has now got a record that they committed hate speech. So, you know, there are actual laws that can be broken, and I feel like a lot of young people don't know that. So I think it's really important to teach these kids that they are breaking the law when they do these things, even when they're online or even when they're in video games, whatever it may be. And I think that's really scary, because kids these days just go home and go on Roblox or whatever it might be, and they're putting themselves in these environments where they're hearing this language.
So talk us through some of the legislation.
So we've obviously got the Equality Act and grievous hate. So anything where they're saying like the N-words or anything that goes above and beyond. So obviously if somebody called you like a cow, that's not classed as like hate. But if somebody called you a dirty N-word, then that would be classed as gross hate. So that's illegal.
Right.
Yeah.
And what age does this apply from?
Any age. Like even students that are in schools could report things to the police, but I just don't think they're aware of that. But obviously you do need things quite often like proof, and you know.
And do you think that at what point do you think the teachers escalate this to the police?
It's a really difficult one, because when kids are quite young, I feel like quite a lot of behaviour is learned, and sometimes it's learned from within the household. So challenging that behaviour is really, really hard, and not always them to blame. I feel like when kids are old enough to understand the repercussion of their actions, so from the age of like 16 plus, I think that they're fully aware.
I think
even
so.
14-year-olds to me are aware,
Yeah.
but it's kind of like you've got to weigh up, do you want this person to be affected fully? And for me, like the first every time I experienced racism from someone a lot younger than me, I was like so taken back. But all I could sit there and think was like, you've learned this from your parents. Like, there's no other way, like, especially when I was younger, because obviously technology wasn't a thing back then, but like there's no other place that they're going to learn the language. So where's it coming from? And at that point I feel bad for that person. So yeah, if it was my own kids in school, I don't know, I'd probably be reporting it very quickly, because it's just frustration, isn't it, as a parent? I could imagine. But I would say 16 plus, definitely I would be reporting it further, especially if the school aren't doing adequate consequences such as suspensions and things, because we see suspensions for people of colour, for children of colour, very light-handedly given out, I feel like, in comparison. And I think that they need to understand that there is such gravity in these words.
Yeah, and I want to touch on again and where we think it stems from. We have got a comment from Anna Nayar, so thank you so much for listening in. Anna has said that Paige, Amber and Sacha have been such an important force in the city. Great to hear about their work in schools. Definitely winning women, and more power to them.
Oh, that's really nice.
So yeah, thank you so much for your comment. If you are listening in, you can give us a call or a text message. This is 106.2 FM on the Winning Women. We have got Saskia, who is talking about Black Snowflake and everything she's doing. So let's talk about Saskia. Tell me a little bit more about where do you think it actually stems from? Is it the how? Is it childhood, family?
I think it is like the world we live in, it's society. You know, systemic racism is, you know, the fundamental. So it's in our systems, it's in our policies. Like this year I was in a school where the policy literally was racist, and none of the teachers even were aware that was their policy until I did a workshop and I kind of made a case study based on their policy, and they were all like, well, the policy is really wrong, and you know, said that the policy was racist. I was like, well, would it surprise you that this is your policy of your school?
Really?
Yeah. And it was about hair braids and the length they should be and like how they should be kept and things like that. But they had no similar policy for straight hair. So it was really interesting that, you know, that it's in those policies and systems. And I think, you know, when we talk about hate speech and the kids that are going out there saying it, I think they're learning it from YouTube, social media still, and their friends. And it's just being passed down through schools. I think it's just because it's in the schools, it's going to be hard to get rid of, because they'll hear the older kids saying it and it just echoes down and down. So even if they're not hearing it in social media, they're probably picking it up in schools.
They are, yes. Yeah, no, I've got experience of my own children as well. So they've picked up, I think there was a little bit of a trend where some children were getting away with it, and then it got picked up.
Yeah.
And actually, when the children were suspended, I think that's when everyone got a little bit, they woke up a little bit and thought, right, this is not right.
Yeah.
But it's still, they find it funny, and I think this is how do you address that with children?
Yeah, they do find it funny quite a lot. I think when I try and talk about like how it affects people's emotions, obviously it really depends on the age range you're working with. When it's older kids, you can really talk about mental health and like how it really impacts people. And then I like to use a lot of my own experiences or whoever I'm working with's experiences, and we really hone in on that, because I feel like when you're really honest with children, they know you're being honest and they appreciate it and respect it and also take it in a little bit more. And quite often I found that it's almost like the children of colour that are finding it more funny, but I feel like they're finding these lessons funny because it's uncomfortable for them a little bit more, because they know that everyone's probably looking at them thinking, oh, they're here just for you or whatever it may be. So it's really trying to like work on how we're delivering it to make sure that it's not affecting anyone individually like that. And that's why we try and make it very much like group based and different like things like that. It stops that isolation of some students that start to laugh when you kind of spread everyone out, make sure they're not staying in friend groups. I think that helps a lot too.
Oh, that's this is so interesting. And in some of the schools, what I've also noticed is that certainly in my children's school is that when we did have issues, it was actually a lot of the lessons around it were being led by white teachers. So what's your take on that, and how do you think schools can make more space for authentic voices?
Yeah, so my experience working in Peterborough schools is very white teacher heavy, and the black teachers tend to be like substitutes or like one of. I know there are some schools that where there are rarities, because I remember talking to Precious about this. I don't know if you're aware of Precious, but she runs the Culture Community Club, and she basically said she's a teacher. She used to work at a school in Peterborough, but she said there was multiple black teachers, so it was a very different experience for her being there. But when I speak to teachers who work in these spaces, I think, one, they don't have the support there. Two, the other teachers will rely on them. So even when I'm doing teacher delivery, I did a session once, and towards the end, the person who'd invited me there came up and was a white woman and sort of said to the group, who was all white women bar one black male teacher who was the PE teacher, and sort of said, okay, if you guys have any issues about racism, you don't forget, you can always ask this said black teacher. And he just looked at me and I was like, right, can we just, not always go to the one black teacher about issues though? You guys should be able to address them yourselves, or use, Google or whatever it may be. Like, there's so much media out there and so much information that you can now get. It's not fair to put it all on the people of colour all the time, because it creates that kind of space that you don't want to enter. And really interesting, I was on a panel recently and we were talking about getting more black people into the police force. And I think it's a similar kind of conversation about getting them into these institutions. But putting people of colour in white dominant spaces is almost setting them up for poor mental health, because you're going to be putting them in a space where they don't have that back-in. And that's a lot to put on someone unless they're really kind of motivated and committed and want to do that. So I think that there needs to be a lot more support for teachers that are kind of spread out across the board. But it does mean we still need those teachers in those spaces, because as soon as you have someone that looks like you within a school, you feel like you have that person you can go and speak to. And I think that's how children feel. So when you're in a school and you have no teachers that look like you, that's really isolating, especially if there is an issue of racism, because you're like, who do I turn to that will actually understand and will take it seriously? And I don't think that they always feel like they can get that from white teachers. So we do definitely need more DEI hiring. But we need that backbone support system as well for the teachers, so that they don't feel isolated and suffer with their mental health for being in those spaces.
And have you had that as feedback? Is that really?
Yeah, I've heard that from different teachers. And also, I think it just shows with the lack of teachers in those spaces. They're not getting hired for these jobs. They end up being substitutes. These substitute teachers still tell me that they're having poor times, whether it be with the students and their attitudes toward them, or from the other teachers kind of like not talking to them in the staff rooms or like isolating them. And I think that's quite sad as well. So I think there's a lot to work on there.
Yeah. So, this is, so if if you're listening, and if, I'd love to hear your comments around this as well. It's such an important conversation at the moment as well, with so much, I feel like education is the way forward to really tackle racism and just understanding of different cultures and why we all look so different. I feel like teachers are also concerned about, and if you are a teacher, do let us know as well, comment on 106.2 FM. But I feel like with teachers, they're also worried about getting it wrong as well, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. I've had that comment so many times. And I think that's because they're not getting that support, and that's why they need more training around these things. In Wales, they've got such a different legal attitude towards these things. Like, they are taught to do anti-racism within schools. Like, it's actually within their curriculum that they have to do that. Whereas like in England, we don't have that. So, we're not giving the teachers the backing they need to, one, get the education to be able to then dish out that education to their students. Which I think is the fundamental issue, to be honest. Yeah.
So, and you've spoken, and what kind of changes have you noticed in the students after you've taught them as well?
Well, they always normally come up to me and they're like, this was so good, thank you. They're always very sweet, bless them. And they normally always say that they want a culture day. I've had that so much, and I feel like TDA started a trend with that, because I go into like Peterborough College or Stamford College and they're like, yeah, we want a cultural day. And I'm like, did you guys come from TDA? Like, I think cultural days.
For people that are listening?
Thomas Deacon's Academy in Peterborough. But yeah, I think the kids want more opportunity to express themselves freely. Whether that be conversational, because I've been into schools very close to after when Chris Cabba was shot, for instance, and the kids were telling me that the teacher's attitude was like, don't talk about it. Yes. He's a criminal. Maybe it was deserved. And like, as a black student, you're probably thinking, hang on a minute, like, there's not even been a trial yet. And this was at that point where there hadn't been a trial yet. and all of that. And it's still like such a hurtful conversation to have about police brutality or over policing. And I think, you know, when you've got teachers shutting you down from having those conversations, that's really challenging as a student.
Actually, my son had that as well. In fact,
really?
Yeah, I think it could have been during George Floyd, and the teacher approached me and said that my youngest was, he said something which she was very surprised that he knew about.
Yeah.
And she thought it was a rather grown-up, mature thing to talk about. And I said, well, actually, this is a conversation that needs to be had, and you know, they're aware because they're of colour.
Yeah, and social media, like I can't scroll on TikTok without seeing like some abusive situations happen in England, especially with the state of the world at the moment and what's happening in England. Like it's everywhere. So kids are seeing this, and we can't protect them from everything, and they're just going to be sharing these things to each other. So yeah, of course they're going to be seeing these things, and there's a thing called vicarious trauma and how it affects people throughout, not just the person that's directly being hit with the racism, but how when George Floyd was murdered, how that impacted so many people of colour and their experiences in life.
Yeah, that was a very big one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So, and you talked about planting seeds. How does that look like?
Yeah, well, for me, I want to plant seeds within our younger ones, because I feel like when we can teach them to be open-minded individuals who are built on purely respect and just letting people be who they are, that will build up, and they're going to become our CEOs, they're going to become our next Prime Minister, they'll become these people that we look up to in society. So if we start with them while they're young and they take that through into their journeys, then that's how we start to create a very kind of collective, like a nice equal space.
And then is it a program? Is it a short program that you run, or over what duration?
So what I normally do is like workshops here and there, like, and at the moment they have been quite ad hoc, but I would like to do maybe more of a series of sessions, because I feel like that's more effective and impact. And I think one of the feedbacks we sort of had was that when we go in one day, it's not as impactful as when we go in throughout the year.
Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll take a short break for ads. So stay with us on Winning Women, and then when we come back, I'd love to know a little bit more about your delivery, the structure, the program that you're offering. And if any teachers are listening in, do feel free to call in or text, and then we'll have a chat about how it could help.
Stay tuned to Salam Radio after this short ad break.
At Cake Inn, all our cakes and slices are freshly baked for that delicious taste. At Cake Inn, we bake 100% vegetarian and halal eggless fresh cream cakes. Delicious flavoured cakes for birthdays and weddings, ceremonies and all other occasions, with free customised messages, even balloons and candles too. Order for delivery or collection from Cake Inn, 489 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PE, and your cake could be ready within 2 hours. Find out more and order online at cakeinn.co.uk or call 01733 496 584.
Craving a heavenly escape in the heart of Peterborough? Heavenly Desserts is the perfect place to relax with friends, unwind with family, or for casual meetings with colleagues. You can now indulge in our delicious brunch menu with mouth-watering savoury delights, served from 11 a.m. every day. Visit us today at Cowgate, Peterborough, the go-to spot for good times and great company. Where else but Heavenly's? Party packages available for birthdays and other celebrations. Also available to order through Just Eat, Deliveroo and Uber Eats.
It's healthy, nutritional and halal. It's The Lads, your first choice for burgers, pittas, wraps and flame-grilled lamb chops and peri-peri chicken. Now with 5 fantastic new flavours. Plus sides, grilled salads and milkshakes too. Open daily from 11:30 until 11 p.m. Call in at 15 Cowgate in Peterborough. Order for collection online at thelads.co.uk or by calling Peterborough 562287 or place your Lads delivery order at ubereats.co.uk.
GLADCA is your community support centre, delivering services you need. Access free English classes for reading, writing, speaking and listening, or a computer course with CV writing, qualified immigration advice and more, including food parcels or supermarket vouchers. GLADCA can help. Also for free yoga and healthy you sessions and monthly coffee mornings with local GPs on site. 316 Gladstone Street and online at gladca.org.uk. Call 01733 566 343.
Fancy the true taste of Middle East and Kurdish food? Asia Restaurant gives you the unique fusion of flavours from Turkey, Iraq, Syria and Iran. Eat in at 5 Fitzwilliam Street, Peterborough, PE1 2RU. Or order through Just Eat, Uber Eats or order through our website asiarestaurant.co.uk. Call us on 01733 562 530. Asia Restaurant, the true taste of the Middle East.
Busy Bunnies Nurseries is where children grow and thrive. It's where your little ones will enjoy expert care, engaging activities and a warm, welcoming environment. Busy Bunnies Nurseries also provide great learning experiences in exceptional indoor and outdoor settings. So when looking for a loving, fun and safe place for your child, visit at 627 Lincoln Road, Peterborough, now with additional parking, or online at busybunniesnurseries.co.uk. Call 01733 897799 to book your visit today. Busy Bunnies Nurseries, where children hop into a brighter future.
At Masters Pharmacy, we put your health and convenience first. We offer free blood pressure checks and blister-packed medication. With our free same-day prescription delivery service, you can have your medication when you need it. We also offer travel vaccinations, including Hajj and Umrah, along with other services to meet all your pharmacy needs. For more information, contact Masters Pharmacy on 01733 567 208 or visit us at 303 Lincoln Road, PE1 2PH.
You're listening to Peterborough's community radio, Salam Radio. Salam Radio. 106.2 FM.
Good evening and welcome back to Winning Women. I'm your host, Iram Shah, and tonight's theme is Unite with Diversity. My guest this evening is Saskia Cole, founder of Black Snowflake. Today's theme is with Unite with Diversity. We're talking about how Saskia is helping tackle racism in local schools. Now, Saskia, you were talking about your delivery program, the type of programs you deliver. Just give us, just talk us through that.
So quite often we have like a base of workshops. So I've got base of workshops where like we'll talk about certain things like anti-racism, or we'll talk about how to deliver.
So we're just going. Saskia's going to talk us through how she delivers her program. So just talk us through that. Sorry, Saskia.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So we do a variety of workshops depending on the age of the students. So with the younger ones, like I mentioned before, we do like a lot of art-based activities and challenge a little bit of theory, but like not so much. We try and make it a bit more creative. Maybe we can incorporate songs and things like that within the work. And then when we get into kind of secondary school, that's where we start to kind of have more conversations with the students, talk about actual words, what they mean. Talk about things like unconscious bias or implicit bias, and explain the differences between these kind of things so that they actually start to understand what's happening within society. Because I feel like when you start to give these children knowledge, that's where you empower them.
Yes. But a lot at the moment, they're taking a lot of this knowledge from social media as well, though, aren't they? So as empowering as it can be quite toxic. So do you think social media is influencing young people's ideas of what race and identity and belonging?
I think that there are pros and cons to social media. Like there's, that support where you can find how to do your hair. And, when I was a kid, I never knew how to do my hair. So I feel like having social media for people like that would be really helpful. And you can also find people that look like you. The flip side is you see the toxic side. You see what's happening to people that look like you, how racism is actually impacting people. And that can be really traumatizing and make you think, oh my gosh, this is the world I live in, and this is going to affect me and my children, my family when I'm older. And that puts a lot of kind of, stress on someone.
Yeah, I feel like some of the racist abuse that young people are emulating, certainly in my children's school, I feel like that could have been at the back of watching some of the footballers face racist abuse, and they use the same terminology offline as well then.
Yeah.
So have you come across that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting that you brought up about the footballers, because I think when the police actually actioned based off social media at that point, I think that really showed, that it's not appropriate to do. But I feel like it's kind of also the flip side of when that happens to like everyday people. There's not always that attitude from the police or other people. So, it's a bit of a hard one for students, because I think they'll think, or like people do get caught out, maybe I shouldn't say these things. But on the flip side, you have the people that are like, I don't care, I probably won't get caught because this person's a nobody, so I'm going to use this language and affect this person in that way. And I think sometimes bullies, especially like when they're children, they don't actually understand that it's going to mentally impact that person on like a higher gravity than just saying it and making them upset in the moment. And I think that that's something they need to be a bit more aware of.
So how do you help students process what they've heard, what they've seen, and
we kind of talk through different things. We talk about case studies a lot, so we'll look at things that other people have experienced. So we talked about Child Q recently and what happened to her. So have you heard of Child Q before?
No, just let the audience know.
Yeah, so she was a child in London. She was a 15-year-old girl and she was strip searched while she was on the period. They basically accused her of having cannabis on her. Yeah. She didn't have a guardian present or anyone there to support her in that moment. So what they did was deemed as unlawful, I'm pretty sure. So we talk about these kind of situations with students and like where they could face challenges growing up, especially when we're talking about police or stereotyping, and kind of give them that power to challenge it. Because with stereotyping, for instance, with students, I see that some children will play into it. And when you put this kind of negative stereotype on a child, either they'll kind of repel it and be like, no, I'm so not that, or they'll just be like, okay, then that's who I am. And I think that's really sad and dangerous.
And very sad that the poor girl didn't know her rights there.
Yeah.
So she was quite submissive and
yeah.
just did
Exactly, but that's also the issue with students and authorities. And you know, when we talked about earlier about not having the presence of somebody that looks like you in that space, you probably feel like you just have to kind of like get on and do what they're saying, because who are you to question it?
Yeah, especially if you're quite young and, you know, you would look up to an authoritarian type figure. So just so people know, so what should have happened then?
An appropriate adult should have been contacted and they should have come down. But in my opinion, she should never have been strip searched anyway. Like, it's just so inappropriate with a child. Like, they could have checked her bag and done things like that. But definitely not without an appropriate adult. The appropriate thing would have been for them to call the guardian parent.
And what other case studies have you come across that people should be aware of?
I can't remember off the top of the head my name. I think her name was Ruby, but there was a girl who basically was scrutinised in her school for having her natural hair and told it was too big and that she needed to put it back, and all of those kind of comments were made, and she basically was put out of school, so like suspended temporarily and stuff until she would wear certain hairstyles.
What was her hair?
It was afro. I think it was 3C or 4C texture. So very, very, very tight afro texture hair. And she basically ended up filing a lawsuit against them and won a lot of money.
What, in the UK?
Yeah, in the UK. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so these are some of the things that real things that people are coming across. So if you've experienced anything and you'd like to share with us, do so, please. You can comment or you can call and on the Winning Women show. There's been a lot of flag waving and public tension recently. How do you think this has also impacted young people?
I feel like for some young people, they'll be really confused and they won't really understand the gravity of like what's happening around them or what it really means. I feel like because I've been in situations where I've been at cultural days and like the kids don't really know how to portray being British as well. I think there's like this hostility with young people where they don't understand what their culture is. And I think, you know, schools do their best to teach what British values are, which includes diversity. But I feel like the adults maybe forget that part, that they still don't really know what to represent when they're representing Britain. So I think seeing the flag around, people are probably just a bit confused a little bit. But for the children of colour, they know what's happening. Specifically, I'm sure they do, because, you know, parents will have the conversation. They'll probably be talking about with their friends. Hostility is really like rising at the moment, and I know racism's been rising in the UK because of it. So, you know, it's a lot of tensions that are happening, and I think that it almost promotes more racism to happen even within the schools, because for the kids that do understand, they'll just be more racist.
And it could be some of their parents that are putting these flags up as well.
Yeah.
So what happens if you're teaching children, but then they go back home to the same environment where parents are probably not so educated on diversity. Have you come across?
It's really challenging, but obviously when you've got kids in schools, like a majority of their time, like a lot of their time is in education. So if we can get it right there, then they can challenge that at home. But I feel like as a child, you don't really start to challenge your parents until you leave the home or until you go to that next step in education where you're at like university and you maybe don't see your parents as much, or you're starting to really feel empowered to be yourself. So it is really challenging. And honestly, I couldn't say specifically because I've not been brought up in that environment, but I can say that the environment I was in was a white heavy household, and I kind of ignored a lot of racism and didn't really bring it up very much because after a certain point I didn't really feel like it was being addressed appropriately, and there was no point. So what was the point? And I feel like as an adult, I turned around to my mum, I think I was 25, and I was just like, you need to read this book. And it was the book Why I Don't Talk to White People About Racism. Renee is her name, the author. It's really good, but it talks about like Black Britain as well specifically, and it talked about Grenfell Tower and Black feminism and all these different aspects. And I was like, Mum, you need to read this because you don't get me, you're really colourblind. And that took me to 25 to be able to challenge my mum. So I think set the expectation that these kids are not going to be able to always challenge their parents. They're just not. But what we can do is try and promote the best we can in education, which is where they spend a lot of their time, and especially a lot of that interactive time. A lot of kids go home and they end up sitting on tablets. Not all parents are highly interactive and having these conversations.
Yeah, and then maybe like teachers, they just don't know how to address it as well.
Yeah.
And they've got their own ideas as well. So what does true unity through diversity look like to you in action?
For me, it means that systemic changes need to happen. We need more policy changes. I think that we need something similar to like what Wales has. I think that schools should be actively pushed to promote anti-racism a bit more than what they are now. Obviously, we've got the Equality Act, but what's really scary is like what the world's looking like and if that will even stay in place, like if certain people get into power. So, you know, the politics of the country is kind of what we need to focus on as well at the moment, and the unity needs to be there. Like we all need to collectively think about what's best for everyone and not just individually ourselves. I think, you know, we're human beings, a lot of us can be quite selfish, but we do have to have that empathetic understanding, which is something I really try and embody when I'm speaking to children and teachers. But we need to embody that as a society so that we can understand where people are coming from, especially, you know, when we're talking about these things like immigration, because those are conversations that kids will still be having in schools, especially when you get a lot of refugee children in Peterborough. Like we have a lot of refugees in Peterborough. So I think that that's a really interesting conversation to have about empathy. And that brings people together.
Yeah, and for the teachers and parents listening to know, what advice would you give to start meaningful conversations at home or in the classroom?
I think be open to having these conversations. Like, don't sit there and sort of say, oh, let's not, like, you know, maybe talk to your parents about that, whatever it may be. But I think you need to be open to that conversation and be open to being wrong. You know, knowledge is about growing and understanding, and we can all do better. Like, I'm not perfect. There's so much more I can learn. No matter how many books I read, I'll always read another one because it just challenges something different. And I also think it's really important that when we talk about being critical thinkers, that we look at both sides. So, like, I won't sit there and only watch one political party, because how am I going to understand the other side? You have to kind of understand and watch everything to be able to actually fight things properly and cohesively. Otherwise, you're just going to end up like not bringing people together. And ultimately, we need everyone to come together. So you've got to kind of understand why people feel how they feel and how then to bring it together.
Yeah, and one of the ways I'm teaching my children actually is through stories. So there are a couple of content creators on LinkedIn that I follow, and they are doing an amazing sort of this month. They're every single day they're sharing stories of Black people and the history right from where it started. It is so good. So I would really highly encourage everyone to follow something. And do you have any? We had an event on Saturday, didn't we?
Yes.
In Peterborough as well. Is there anything else coming up at all that people can get involved in as well?
So not that I'm specifically aware of event-wise, but we have like lots of different community things. So we've got Culture Community run by Precious, and honestly, that's such an amazing business that's been set up. And as I say, Precious, she used to be a teacher, and what Culture Community is about teaching that history education. But it isn't just for Black students, even though the history is focused around that. It's for everybody, because she wants it to be all inclusive and kind of give other people the opportunity to learn about Black history too, which I think is really, really good and positive within the community space. We do obviously have our Black Community Centre at the Millennium Falcon. I just said Star Wars. At the Millennium Centre. Yeah, that's happening there. And then other than that, I would like to see the museum do something soon, which hopefully maybe I can speak to them about. But we've had some amazing talent come out of Peterborough. There's a girl that used to be in my school who was younger than me. That school I got pulled out of for racism. And her name was Rini. Forgetting her last name right now, but she's become like a really big artist and does like quite a lot of events. So I can give you her details after. But yeah, there's all of these individuals that are coming out of Peterborough, but they always seem to leave. So we need to bring them back and get them to do something else. That would be cool.
And so looking ahead, what's your vision for Black Snowflake?
So I've got a meeting coming up with Peterborough City Council, and I'm really hoping to speak to their head of education about kind of how we can help pursue getting into more schools to support that, because at the moment we're getting into schools based on parents kind of suggesting us, or having met them at other times, or students actually telling their teachers about us too. So I think being able to get our leg in the door and support them, but also for them to not feel like it's extra, and like make it a part of maybe the curriculum, or make it a part of the process of the educational systems across Peterborough, as something mandatory or something supported by the council could be really positive. So that's what I would really love to hope for the future of that. But alongside that, I want to do other things. So I'm looking to set up a podcast series. I'm looking to do like live interviews within Peterborough area.
Of what podcasts based on?
Like the people in Peterborough, and just stories of people that live here. Like there's so many different people from different areas. I just kind of want to get to know people, and I think that would be really positive to kind of shine a light on different people's experiences here.
That's what I love about Winning Women. I've actually get to meet so many amazing women, women that I didn't even know existed. And I really hope that everyone's picking up this, enjoying the show for the same reason as well. Everyone's bringing a different sort of form of expertise. It's really nice.
Yeah, I hear that, and that's what's so good about when you get to interview people. So I definitely would love to try and do that in the future. But other than that, this year I spent a lot of time working on a book, so for children, and its focus is on Key Stage 1 and 2, because like I've mentioned, I really feel like we need to start very young. And it's going to be called, should I tell you guys? Maybe I won't. I'll tell you all of the character's name though. The character's name is going to be Nala. So it's about a little girl and kind of her journey with identity, and it's done, I think, in a very nice way, and I'm just waiting on the illustration, so hopefully it will be out later this year or early next year.
Brilliant. Good. And how are people how can people find out a little bit more about what you do, especially teachers that are listening in? Who would be your ideal, who should reach out to you?
Anybody that works within a school. Like I've worked with directly like some teachers, but I've also worked directly with head teachers, or the DSL, whatever it may be. I'm happy to speak to anybody, or if you're a student listening, I'm more than happy to speak to you as well. There's ways we can kind of support you within getting us into your school if that's something you think is important as well. We've got our social media on Instagram is Black Snowflake, is BLK Snowflake, and our website is blksnowflake.com. That's where you can find me.
Thank you for sharing. So Saskia is on Winning Women. If you are joining in just now, good evening to you. You can watch the show on replay, but as you're live at the moment, do call, do text, share your experiences. We're going to ask Saskia, if you had unlimited resources, what new project or campaign would you love to launch?
Well, I would love to not only finish my book, but I want to make it a series, and I want it to be like a diversity series where it's not just like this specific character's story. Like I want to look at different people, because when I go into schools, one of the biggest things I talk about is that to be anti-racist means you should be anti-homophobic, anti-ableism, and all these other things, because ultimately what it should be is that we should be respecting everyone for who they are. And so I kind of want to make a series where it's like all these little black snowflakes or all these little snowflakes that are all different people, and talk about their different challenges in school or in life, but at those younger ages where children can relate to it, but also other children might think, oh, like maybe I'll meet someone like this one day, and have that kind of resource in the back of their brain. And it's all about what I said earlier about knowledge as power. So if we can give these kids and these knowledge, then they can utilize that going forward. And honestly, if we don't do that, that's where we create that kind of instinct where you get fight or flight triggered. So when we talk about actually biologically what happens in your brain, if you're not trained to understand or to know that like different people won't hurt you, when you see someone that looks different to you at a very young age, automatically your fight or flight is triggered. So that's why you get that hostility or you get that fear from kids when they meet people that don't look like them. And that's why it's important to do that. So for me, having a series of books that kind of champion all these different people would really support that.
That's a really good idea. There's not much out there at all. I mean, one of the things I did when my children were being taught superheroes, I think, how old were they? Maybe sort of 7. And I just felt as if there was nothing. All the books were, blue-eyed, blonde hair type, Cinderella style. So I actually went on a mission to look for books that showed a little. And to be fair, I still didn't find a lot. I found, so it's really difficult. So I think we definitely need more authors sharing more of our stories and more representation.
Yeah, I feel like it's getting better, but there's still so much that can be done. And I also think we need more events. You know, like the community funding, I think needs to be like even better, because like we had the Culture Carnival, which was amazing. Again, that was put on by Precious, but like more activities like these where we have celebrations of the community, because I feel like quite often when we think about Black History Month, is some people will think, oh gosh, it's going to be just talking about the history of slaves, and it's like quite depressing. Like even for people of color, like we don't want to just sit there and talk about the slave trade. We want to sit there and talk about all these success stories, our mathematicians, our scientists, whatever it may be, and these people are out there.
That's actually a good point. Yeah, because I think Black History Month, we all do get, I've seen a lot of the content, it's been around slavery and people trying to share how this slavery, and I've also seen just all the challenges that Black people are having. But you're right, it needs to be a little bit more celebration, more success stories.
Yeah,
very good point. So this, you've also worked across education, gaming, and media. So how do these worlds come together in your mission?
So yeah, my other job outside of this, I do content creation and gaming, and within that, I challenge ideas around racism within gaming a lot too, and I challenge that with companies I work with very often, and I challenge that within the video games company too, but I also then take that back into schools. So for instance, I delivered to the University of Peterborough a session where we talked about gaming, and I worked with the gaming design students, and I set them a challenge to kind of create diverse games, and we talked a lot about like gaming characters and like how that really impacts that. And there's actually somebody called Ebonics who did a women's TED Talk, and she talked very much about kind of when we don't see women of colour or people of colour within games, it's like erasure. And I thought that was a really good point. And there's all these women out there and all these amazing people out there doing these things, and I think I like to kind of support them as much as like the things I'm doing, so giving them extra voices, sharing what I can. That's kind of the best we can all do, right?
Yeah, and gaming, actually that's going to work really well with today's generation, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Boys in particular, would you say?
Yeah. No, I tell them I'm a gamer and they're like, oh wow, you're so cool, miss. I'm like, yep.
So a lot of this takes a lot of emotional energy. Does it trigger you as well? Does it bring up old memories? How do you protect yourself?
It can sometimes, especially when I've spoken to kids who kind of are experiencing now really similar things to that I've experienced. It just makes me feel sad that we've not really like grown very much as a society. But I also get so much like pleasure and satisfaction and mental health kind of rebound from like when I speak to students who are like, thank you so much for coming in, or like this has really helped, or like we're going to be doing this now because of this, you know, or seeing the outcomes. So for instance, when I did the gaming thing, and you know, I got an email after about how the next session went and like the students' work, like that's really like valuable to me. So that's almost kind of like the bounce back. So seeing kind of the initial chain of reaction of like the impact that I've had really does back my mental health, but it would be challenging without that, definitely.
Yeah. And you've become a really good role model for young women of colour in the city. You're doing so much. What do you want them to know about leadership and self-worth?
I think I want them to know that it doesn't have to happen overnight, and even little things make massive differences, because I feel like sometimes people think, if I'm not doing everything, I'm not doing enough. And it's like, we can't do everything. You know, we still got to have a job and work. And I was saying to you before, like I've still got other jobs outside of all this that I do. You got to make ends meet at the end of the day. So I think doing what you can and supporting where you can, and remembering that, you know, your idea is not stupid, and just trying, because what's the worst that can happen? You know, like you never know.
And that's how you started. So if you could speak to your younger self before all this began, what would you have told her?
Well, I never thought I'd end up here. I never thought I'd write a book, and I never thought I would start a business in DEI. Like I thought I was going to be a fashion stylist, and I was for a little while, but like my heart brought me here. And I think what I would say to myself is just follow my heart.
Yeah, and since this is Winning Women, what does winning mean to you, both personally and professionally?
Winning is seeing kids smile and like see them be happy with who they are, and you know, specifically girls as well, because I feel like, you know, there's a lot on women, how to look, especially with black women. It's like to have your hair straight, like all this, like, you know, what's beautiful, like beauty Western standards. And I think, you know, colorism is really a big issue still that affects a lot of women. So being able to support that and see them winning, seeing them in campaigns, seeing them succeeding, that's winning to me. Is like when I see other people break these boundaries.
And finally, in the spirit of united with diversity, what message would you share with listeners about how we can all be part of the solution, not the conversation?
I think be as open-minded as you can and try and have the conversations where you can, but also remember that sometimes people, they're never going to see the same as you, and sometimes it's better just to walk away. You know, some people will have very different views and opinions, and you can't change it all the time, but you can change yourself, and you can change, that's what you can control. So you've got to work with what you can control at the end of the day. So yeah, exactly. And we've learned so much today. I'd really like to read that book, and in particular we're going to make a note of, so do follow us on Facebook and YouTube, and we will share the book that Saskia mentioned. So we'll talk about that. We're going to put some lessons that we've learned today, and I've learned so much as well. I think it's such an important conversation to bring upon diversity and educating, and especially when we start them young. So this is so powerful. So we as this, and that brings us to the end of Winning Women. A huge thank you to Saskia Cole, founder of Black Snowflake, who you can follow on Instagram. Thank you for joining us, and for the important work that you're doing to help schools and communities embrace difference with confidence and compassion. Our theme tonight was United by Diversity. Reminds us that inclusion is not just about representation, but about connection, listening, learning, and standing side by side. To find out more about Saskia's work, visit her on www.b for Bravo, L for Lima, K for Kite, snowflake.com, or follow her on at Black Snowflake on Instagram, and that's Black spelled with a BLK. Thank you for sharing your evening with me on Winning Women as well. If you are joining just now as well, you can listen back on the replay. We'll put all the replay links in there as well. Have a very good evening, and next up we've got a football show, so I hope you enjoy that.